The voltage is never too high.
What's up, everybody?
Hey guys, what the fuck?
Hope everyone enjoyed tonight's DJ Muehlberg playlist. That was Matt Gray, whose Kickstarter. At least I backed. I don't know if any of you guys backed it.
I backed it.
It was called Reformation, and it was he did some remixes of, I guess, Amiga tracks from back in the day. So unfortunately, the album is like 3 years late delivering on the physical rewards, but we have all the MP3s, so that's cool, and it's good stuff. So check that out if you thought that music was cool. So how's everyone doing?
Doing great. Doing so good tonight. Doing good
Excellent.
for you.
Excellent. It's been nothing but a positive day with positive interactions on social media.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I kind of had a crappy day. So I went to the grocery store, the drugstore, and they usually have Mountain Dew Kickstart, and they were replaced by these crappy new Diet Coke flavored nonsense, which I'm drinking because I have to buy them, but they're not that good.
Yeah.
I had a feeling they weren't going to be. I think me and you have talked about this before. Coke and innovation is just.
Oh yeah,
they do what they do well, but they don't. When they branch out, it kind of goes awry.
Yeah.
New Coke forever. New Coke.
Right, Coke 2.
Like the new Coke, it'll be around forever. Ha ha ha.
Well, welcome back to the audience. We all have some cool topics to talk about tonight, so why don't we just get right into that? Who wants to start?
I'll go first. My name is Bob, and I'm getting drunk with my friends tonight because I had a frustrating week at work, and I'm very much looking forward to getting drunk with the members of the Retro Roundtable, with the people in the topic that always comes out and hangs out with us, and the topic in the chat. And then, of course, everybody that watches the next day. There's a lot of people that are off of different time zones that can't participate live, and it's too bad because I'd love Jimmy Hoppa in there messing with us, teasing all of us, and fucking with Voultar. But to everybody, I will be drinking tonight, so expect me to make an ass of myself because I want to lighten up and be in a good mood. So
maybe one day we'll do like an 8 a.m. stream. And the good thing about that is you drink at that time anyway, so it's not like going to be any different for you.
Funny you mention that, but in like the past year, the only time I've done that was with the interview with Jimmy Hoppa. So we'll get his ass on here to drink with us. So.
Love Kevin Spacey.
Bob, you mentioned something about friends. So when do we get to meet these friends?
I got one or two.
It's like the alleged wife.
Yeah.
Or the alleged neckbeard.
Yeah.
So good.
All right, who's next? And who's going to top that?
I'll go next. Hi, everyone. It's Lord Voultar, or just Voltaire, to all of you, my friends in Canada. Having a great time tonight. I've had a rockin' day, super productive. As far as things I'm working on, I don't have much of an update for you yet, but I will have an update here and then probably in the next week. I would share some photos, but I'm not at liberty to at the moment. It's highly confidential, the new secret installation that's in the backyard. I have shared them with our friends here on the Retro Roundtable. The wiring in the new installation that we're going to now call E1M1. The wiring is complete. I have gigabit twisted pair Cat 6 out there to the new facilities. It's all running great. I'm finishing flooring and I'm putting all the desks in. So, hopefully within the next week, I'll be getting back on all these super large projects. But at the moment, I'm just covered up in mod work. I have about 15 boxes here. I work all the time for you men and women to get this stuff done. I'm sorry if there's been a slight delay. Have patience for my body. Things are going very well. Thank you. Also, one quick thing I would like to say. if you're running network drops and you don't have access to your wall cavities, these little bastards right here are amazing. These are low, slim profile RJ45 adapters with, you can either put adhesive on the back or you can screw them in. But the routing of this little PCB that the Terminator fits into is, you really can't see the routing, but it's fantastic. I bought a box of 11 of these for $8. For $8. So if you have to do any sort of if you're doing any sort of network drops and you don't have access to the cavity of the wall, get you some Raceway and buy these. We didn't have these years ago when I was running buildings for a living back in the late 90s. It was much harder back then, but I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, we use a bunch of those, but they all need keystones inside of them. So I see yours has the connector built in, right?
The keystone is, and the
That's
Terminator
awesome.
is in there. So, I mean, there's nothing you have to do. Just get you get a punch down tool and punch down your connection there, punch down your twisted pair, and you're done. You just put the damn thing back together. You set it on the wall, and you've got the internets on your walls.
And as someone who's seen the pictures of his shed, I can say without a doubt that the bodies will stay fresh and not start to smell for weeks based on the amount of insulation and temperature control that he's put into that thing.
Yeah.
Funny
Yes.
that's what you got out of it, because when I saw the pictures, the first thing I thought is how much more shit I could send Zach.
You are such
Yeah.
a fucker.
He sent us a picture of the kickback corner.
Yeah, that's right. Bob's
I had
corner.
to add an extra 200 square feet for the Bob kickback corner.
Yep.
That's where all the shit I'll never use again goes.
I got a pile right behind my monitor here of what I'm sending you next. I've been collecting stuff for you.
Wow.
Yay!
Aren't you so glad I pay you to be my friend?
Yeah, well, it does have its benefits, not really, but whatever.
So who's up? Steve?
I'll go.
Oh, yeah. Renee, go for it.
Yeah. So, my name is Cancer, first name Boy, in case no one noticed. Some updates. So I'll do some nice demonstrations for the UMD, the Mega
Boy
Dumper.
cancer?
Boy Cancer, yes, because Cancer Boy is already taken. So this is a nice 72-pin, 2.50 millimeter pitch connector, and this is a lovely NES board,
Oh, cool.
and it fits beautifully. So this type of adapters come in for the UMD. This is a nice custom 2.5 millimeter SNES connector with the expansion slots, as you see. And SNES boards fit perfectly in there as well. Oh my god, that's so sexy. Okay. So there's
watching you pull out, Renee.
Renee, I'm really excited for these because let me tell you something about your Mega Dumper. I just want to say this real quick. People have asked me about this. I'm like, they need to ask you. This thing is going to make dumping SRAM states so you can change the battery out and restore the original save file on that cartridge so much easier. And that in itself, just to let everyone know, that's a big service that's offered that you may not really know about. But updating batteries and cartridges while preserving the SRAM, Renee's product is going to be perfect for that. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah,
I
I'm
would
sure
buy
there
that
are
just for that
tons of
reason
people
alone.
out there with like an emotional connection to some saved game that they've had on there since they were kids and don't want to lose. So it's really cool.
Yep.
That's part of it for me, but for me the other side is I do love playing older games, and those batteries are going to die at some point. So if I work my butt off and I get 20 hours into a game, like I would, if I have one of those dumpers, every time I'm done playing, I'm just going to go over and back up my save just in case today is the day that battery goes.
For sure.
We did see a question about this come across on Twitter, and someone asked if you will be able to hashtag beat it while you're taking a mega dump.
You can.
I don't see why
can.
not.
It's completely different sides of your body, anyways.
It's one of the built-in features.
Yeah, I don't have. Give me 2 seconds. I'm gonna grab something right here.
I'll give you 3.
If it's a Mega Dumper T-shirt, you've won the night.
So this This is the first one that I found in my on my shelf. PGA Tour with Game Gear.
Great game.
Brand new PGA Tour. I just said it by Tengen.
One of the best.
So again, Game Gear. Oh my God, that fits so nicely. I had never seen a brand new Game Gear connector before, and I have found someone that manufactures them brand new.
No kidding.
So this will
What?
make. I think this is revolutionary for Game Gear.
Do you have any idea what this person is doing with those? Who's buying their stock?
I have no
justify
idea.
that?
I have no idea.
There's someone like buying a bazillion and just giving you a few.
Well, that's
right?
like the piece. That's like the Hue card connectors Renee found. If you think that's ambiguous, who the fuck's going to buy those?
Yeah.
Well, I
And-
bet you there's a lot of places that have new old stock because there's a lot of warehouses around the country that are in very rural areas that, if they're still around, they just, why would they get rid of all of their extra stock? And the next thing you know, 10 years comes around and that thing that was useless 5 years ago is now selling for almost full price again. So
That
it
makes
makes
sense.
sense. Yeah.
That makes sense.
But
Patrick.
but I specifically asked this manufacturer, and he said that these are brand new, and we can compare too with existing Game Gear connectors because they're not completely identical. I have an example here somewhere. There we go. See, the Game Gear one is tall because it has to stick out of the PCB a lot, and this one's designed to be flat on a PCB. So there's a big difference.
Right.
Huh.
So
I
do
wonder
you
if
think-
that was for Game Genies.
Yeah. Do you think that
Oh.
is the Game Gear thing, the Game Gear interface? Do you think that's maybe that's not proprietary to the Game Gear, and maybe there's some oddball device that uses the same interface connector? Maybe.
Well, I thought it was proprietary because the pin spacing is really fucked up, and it's staggered too. I don't
know.
have one that's open here.
Super interesting though.
No, it kind of looks like the pin spacing on the Sega cards. I don't know if you've seen those, but they're 100 thou, but then there's another row up that's offset by 50 thou.
Yeah.
So
I think what those
yeah,
are based on.
so that's my hardware update, and I've also been working my ass off on trying to learn. Well, not trying. I've successfully learned and developed, quite a few schematics and libraries in KiCad so far, or KiCad. I think the I is long. Yeah.
Cuckold.
Cuckold, yes. And it's just one step closer to providing a whole bunch of open source solutions for the community. I see, ever since I've started working in KiCad, I've been getting a lot of followers and starring on GitHub. So I'm really happy that people are going to be using this material for their own means as well.
I think the best feature of the UMD is that actually the guy who made the NES Maker, Joe Granato, talked about it like over a year ago when me and Nick went to his panel at Retro World Expo, where like he imagines it's sometime in the future with all this homebrew for old game consoles coming out, that a licensing model such that a video game store doesn't have to stock games. They would, if someone wants to buy it, they would go out back and program a cart.
Oh, yeah.
And have that like charge some sort of system to the developer or whoever, distributor.
That way you don't have to take inventory risk on
Yes.
on buying up like 20 of some homebrew that nobody ends up liking. You could just throw the ROM on there if that one person comes around for it.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting idea, and it that plus you have the other option for full-scale production where you do make a lot and you have it loaded onto the local flash, and it does the copy really fast. I think this is huge for homebrew.
Yeah. Well, that's what, in fairness, that's what Nintendo did in the mid 80s and the early 1990s. In the mid 1980s with the Famicom, we had something called the Famicom Disk System. And you could literally go up to a kiosk in an electronics store and write your own games. And then the 90s with the Super Famicom and the Super Nintendo, you had when Flash Media started to get a little cheaper, even though it was only maybe 4 or 8 megabits, you could go into a store, a rental store or an electronics store, and you could flash like small low or small high ROM SNES games onto these little flash cartridges. Basically, what it looked like was a really small Game Boy cartridge that went into what appeared to be. I guess it looked. I can't remember if it looked like a SNES cartridge or a Game Boy or a Super Game Boy, but nonetheless, it's a little flash cartridge. You would dump your game, you'd write your game to, and that would fit into a larger cartridge in your Super Famicom. And it was a part of that low risk rental or purchasing model, and I think that would work really good for in that kind of an application as far as homebrew and shit is concerned.
Yeah, this exact model I've discussed with a few homebrewers in the last 2 weeks, where they've approached me and they said, "Oh, we want to release this game," and they actually flat out said, "We're not afraid to buy a lot of stock because we know that we're buying blanks and we're going to develop more titles in the future, so we can take the risk." Well, there is no risk. We can take the benefit of buying in bulk, save a few bucks per board, and we know we can just flash them as our binaries are ready. You don't need to commit to a static ROM and be stuck with 1,000 of something, right?
So how would that work? Do you think they would come out with would they just print a shitload of various labels, and whatever they flash to it, they would put the label on, and then later if somebody wanted to change it, they would reflash it and just change the label on the cart?
Well, I think you could go so far as assembling the cartridge in a shell, right? And then when you're ready for a title, you get your artwork printed, and then you burn the game onto the flash and you sell it.
Yep. Okay. Cool.
It would be interesting to talk to some of the, used game stores as to whether they'd be interested in piloting something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely need to hear what they think on that.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that's it for boy cancer.
Jesus Christ, Renee.
And dude, your eyebrows are totally still there. They're not penciled in or anything. There's no way that's a fucking totally inaccurate slander.
You look like you have diabetes.
The libel laws in this country.
Fondork was fucking around and said that with your glasses you looked like E.T. Now that's fucking funny.
Awesome. I've heard Elf before because I have pretty pointy ears, but never E.T. That's pretty original.
See, it's always funny it's always fun if it's funny.
Oh man, we should make René Pogs.
You know Alf?
Yeah, River Alf. All right, I guess I'll go next. So something I've been kind of working on along with Dreamcast stuff is so me and Nick used to go into stores and test TVs with Sega Nomads and stuff like that. Kind of get an idea of what's compatible with 240p and what processes it correctly. And so we tried before using the Raspberry Pi to generate different video modes, but they didn't replicate the quirks that the SNES had or the quirks that the Genesis had or any of these other consoles had. And so we always wanted to make some sort of device that allows us to go and do this more accurately without dragging in a bunch of consoles into the store. And so something I've been working on is this kind of device. I call it the portable video tester. On the bottom there is an FPGA dev board that has a HDMI connector. And what I stacked on top is everything else I needed. I needed a new crystal. I wanted a 7-segment display to show the user what video mode they're on, because there's these buttons that you press to change. From Super Nintendo to Genesis, there'll be a legend, number 0 is this, number 1 is this. And then analog Luma output to test component video. So we could test component compatibility and HDMI compatibility, all the standard def things. And it has this, I put a micro USB for power, because the idea is to hook this up to one of those USB power banks that people use to recharge their cell phones. And I measured the current on this when all the LEDs are on. So you could probably, with the smallest, like 5,200 milliamp hour brick, like this thing will last like 13 hours or something. So you get a pretty good charge. And so, yeah, I developed this thing that stacks on top, and I have somebody who's going to build a case for it because when you go into the store like this, you get eyeballed by the employee. So having something kind of enclosed is better. But
I suspect that depending on the store, you'll still get eyeballed, even with the enclosure.
Usually Costco's pretty cool.
Yeah, Costco has been cool for me in the past, too. It's Best Buy that's a bunch of...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Best Buy always... They don't have any part of that. But
I bet you if you send me one of those, I bet you the guys at B&H would be really into that because they're like what Best Buy wishes they could be, and the people there, well, they're retail salesmen. They seem to actually care about the stuff, or at least care about being nerdy and knowing about electronics. So I bet if I walked in with that, I'd probably get a group of them surrounding me, like, "What is this? Like, tell me about it." So
what is this shit?
The other thing we might think about doing with it is I've been fairly friendly with the guys over at the website Artings, which is up in Canada, and they have just a warehouse of TVs that they have for testing and all that stuff. And they told me that anytime I'm up in is it Montreal or Toronto? I forget which one they're in. I think it's Montreal. But if I'm
the same thing, right?
Yeah, whatever. Canada, Vancouver. If I'm up there, that I could swing by their warehouse and check it out, and I bet they would be very interested in something like that because I've kind of prodded them several times to add old video mode testing to their suite of things that they do for TVs.
So, why don't we do the retro roundtable road trip? Why don't we all plan on going up to that facility with that, and we all go in and mess with it, and then plan it around the trade show up there in Montreal?
Have you fucking forgotten that I am banned from Canada?
We could smuggle you in. We'll put that pretty dress on you that we had that guy draw on you. You could be our pretty princess going across the border.
But seriously, talking about televisions, Ace was I didn't get a chance to respond to him, but Ace sent me a message. Maybe it was today, Ace, or yesterday. I don't remember. But evidently, there's been another update to Vizio televisions. And this latest update to a select few models has increased the input latency response by around 50 milliseconds.
50?
Whoa.
50 milliseconds. What? So Ace could shed some more light on that. But, I was a big proponent of the D-Series 2016 Vizios. The more and more shit that happens with Vizio, the more I'm inclined to just migrate over to the inexpensive TCL platform, because at least they're receptive to people on Twitter and they have a very clear line of sight communication and don't try to hot dog you or ball you or fuck you around like a little boy. Ooh.
So I was trying to get this thing up, but yeah, there we go. So there's just some portable TV I have that has HDMI that I kind of use for development.
Nice.
But I have like a color bar pattern. It's kind of blooming, but the color bar pattern, and then there's a flashing box here for like 240p.
Which totally looks static on the stream.
which won't show up. And then I was gonna put like some text here on this side, maybe showing the video mode or maybe some like version number or something. And then the Luma is just the same thing, but black and white, really. And so, but it would be able to generate all the sync timing patterns that equivalent to what the retro console would put out. So
excellent. And Steve, does that keep intact the odd extra line issues with like the Neo Geo and the funny blank space in the sync,
horizontal sync slices, yeah,
on the SNES, and where that can trigger differently on televisions and whatnot? Does it of those?
That's the whole point. But I mean, the firmware is not done yet. So
right, but the idea is that but the idea is that all of these things will be perfectly replicated so you can really exercise a television to see how well it's going to work. Guys, in chat, this is revolutionary. This is the thing that the New Testament was made of. Absolute innovation and science.
Yeah, this thing is that's not done yet is changing the world as we speak.
Yeah, Zach, funny, I was about to interrupt you and say it's actually bigger than that, but I'm pretty sure you just got about as big as you could possibly describe something. But in all seriousness, it's bigger than testing TVs, because now people who want to design upscalers, they could use this as of course you're always going to want to test with the original console, but when you're running through basic tests on firmware updates or anything, you don't want to sit there with 20 different consoles plugged in. Just sit there and cycle through. So yeah, this is a big deal. Good call, Steve.
Yeah, no, it's something we've had on the plate for a while, and I started building the hardware like over Christmas when I was ill, and yeah, I'm just working on the firmware off and on now, but yeah, I'm trying to just have it on the back burner because I need to get some other stuff done now. But now that I had the hardware, I kind of want to get the hardware all like built up mechanically to give it to the guy who's going to build me an enclosure for it. So,
well, I'm just excited as hell about this. I got to be honest, I'm kind of hard for myself.
Sweet.
On that note, Nick, you're up.
So I got an interesting product this past week that probably a lot of you have heard about. It's it's a GameCube Mini. It's got 120 games, and it just plugs into the HDMI. No, I'm kidding. It's the GCHD by Eon, which kind of came out of nowhere. So we decided to order one, crack it open, and take a look at what's going on. So it looks like this, although yours will probably show up not destroyed. So there's the... And basically what it is it's got a digital out for the GameCube, and then a little oddly shaped... It's not shaped like the SNES multi-out connector, or Nintendo multi-out connector. It's got a weird, goofy shape, but it doesn't really matter. It's only there for stability, that there's no actual connections to the analog port on your GameCube. But so what this does is give you HDMI out via the unseen firmware that was developed for decoding that GameCube digital stream. And of course you need the GameCube actually has the digital port, so you need a DOL001, I think it's the model.
Yeah.
And here's the board.
Show it to me, Nick. Show it to me now.
So we had to saw through this thing using a Dremel to crack it open, because it was what I think was ultrasonically welded shut and impossible to pry open. So that process cost me a couple of years of my life. Even with the windows open and wearing a mask, I got so dizzy from the smell. But yeah, me and Steve sat the other night and analyzed it and have some thoughts about the... Well, we can cover kind of the good and the bad. Mechanically, my opinion is that it's a little snug. It's snugger than I wish it was, and I took measurements of this thing. It's actually smaller. So if you measure kind of the height, width, and length of that digital connector, it's slightly smaller than the actual GameCube component cable. Yet it fits a lot snugger, and it probably has to do with what's going on the inside, which is, of course, a little bit harder to measure. To the point where I thought that I had received one that didn't work at first. I tried probably 5 times and didn't get this thing to power on. Because, and this could just be like variation. It could just be my GameCube that's tighter than others. But I spoke to Wes over at Retrofixes, and he came across the same thing where you need to put a good amount of force and feel a click into your console before you know that it's seated properly.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, doing that once is fine. If I was going to use this thing just and leave it in my console, that probably wouldn't bother me. If I was going to constantly take it in and out, I think it would concern me that the fit was like that.
If you're constantly pulling out.
Yeah, if I was constantly pulling out, which I never do.
Damn right.
Just leave it in there. Board layout. I mean, Steve's more the expert on that than me, but I think both kind of just
Look good to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in general, it looked like, if you look at that board, it looked like this was made by somebody who has experience making electronics before. It wasn't novice at all. The differential pairs that go to the HDMI port they looked like they were impedance controlled, like they were next to each other at a certain distance. The only thing I think I didn't like about the circuit was
the diode that was
the Zener diode for the 5 volts. So the way it works is they're using the connector from the GameCube has 12 volts and it has 3.3. The 3.3 powers a lot of the FPGA, but the FPGA also needs a 1.2 volt core voltage, and there's a switching regulator on there that steps down from 3.3 to 1.2 for that. But the DVI spec, I guess, because this is like pseudo HDMI, right? This is mainly DVI. The DVI spec.
They call it enhanced DVI. Right.
The DVI spec requires 5 volts on one of the pins, and it's meant to power the memory chip in monitors for when it's off or in a state like that, where it can read the supported modes, and then they could talk to each other and do all that stuff. But that channel's not even connected. But still, what I've noticed with a lot of TVs is if that pin isn't powered, you can't even select your HDMI input. So you need to put like a 5 volt on there. The problem I have with the Zener diode is that the way they have it, it's not going to be able to sync more than a few hundred microamps without dropping down. And you're supposed to be able to supply 50 milliamps of 5 volt power. And if you read the DVI spec a little differently, you could get away with 10, but this thing barely a milliamp you can support off that Zener diode circuit. I think the Shuriken video, what this is based on, they have an actual LDO regulator to supply the 5 volt from the 12, and that would, to me, I didn't see why that was taken out. I mean, it's likely a cost issue. Putting a resistor in a Zener diode is a lot cheaper than putting another regulator that you're not using elsewhere on the board. So and the other thing, I guess the Shuriken had the same thing. There's pull-ups on the DDC line, which I said is not used, but they're the wrong pull-up values. They're 10K, and they're supposed to be between 1.5K and 2.2K for DVI, and usually the middle, 1.8 is what you usually put on there. But I guess it doesn't matter since you're not talking to, and it's not real DVI. Nothing's in spec. Nothing's compliant to anything. So maybe none of this matters. But that's the stuff I noticed with the board.
Let me ask a question about this, because I was kind of...
Sorry, somebody in the chat was asking if it's a 3D printed connector or a mold.
No, this is like there's a tool made to make this plastic box. If that's what you're referring to, or are you talking about both? Actually, so the answer to both is they spent good money on tooling. This is not 3D printed.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt you, Zach.
Oh no, that's fine. Yeah, the picture. I mean, there's a delay between what we see on the YouTube and our Skype feed, but there's that TO92, TO93 part. I don't know what that's for.
The
What is that?
IR.
That's
It's the IR.
infrared.
You can see there's a
There's a little bubble on
little
there.
bubble on it.
Is there? Okay, I can't see it. I'm too good for this. But my question.
There's a reason why it's like sticking up like that. At first, when I saw it, I'm like, "Oh, this thing is stupid. Why is it doing that?" But when it's packaged in, those the LED and the IR sensor are folded over, so it can be in that little window.
Yeah, so there's a little window at the top of like a clear plastic. So that's these kind of bend over and get right under that.
Okay, I understand. I understand now. Well, looking at the layout, just from an overhead, the layout looks pretty. It was done by somebody competent. But my question is, I don't think initially, at least on their Amazon page, there was any mention of Unseen or that this was referenced or based on an open source release. Now, that's not really my question. My question is based on the license of Unseen's GC video thing, whatever license it is, I'm not sure. But if somebody
it's a 2BSD clause license, and
it's very liberal, open.
Okay,
license.
so
very easy to comply with.
Yeah.
Okay, so what that translates into is if there's a fork in the firmware, otherwise no. In other words, if there's a change made or an addition or an addendum made in firmware, you don't have to release that back to the source or let that be available for everybody. Is that right?
That's correct with this one.
Okay.
All you have to do to be compliant with this license is in the documentation, either like if you have some help menu in there, or if you ship with some piece of paper that you have that license thing printed. And they didn't comply with that, actually. So
yeah,
they have to do that, which, based on everything I saw with this product, where it looked like this was done by people who were like seeing what was around and being like, why isn't anybody doing this? And they're like experienced product developers, and they built product for end users before. That's what it looked like to me. And for them to fail at that easy part.
Well, I'll say this though, I don't know this team at all. I have zero interaction with them. But last week I was pissed for that same reason. I absolutely, I don't like it when people abuse open source, because the whole thing that I love about open source is somebody just says, I don't want to deal with support. I don't want to deal with any manufacturing. I'll give it to people. I just want credit. I love that. I think that's the coolest thing in the world. And to just skip the only request of just crediting the original developer, I think is shitty. So last week I came down kind of hard, and the same day that my podcast aired, they contacted me on Twitter and posted in the video politely. Unlike other manufacturers that flip out if you just even give them polite, compliments, they did the opposite. They said, "Hey, we're sorry. It's on there now," and they immediately updated their page.
Right.
So I don't know anything about them other than like they at least took the feedback to heart immediately.
Both their page and actually, if you go to the About menu of this, I'm not very familiar with GC Video, so maybe this is on that by default. But there is an About page that credits Igor. I think that's his name, right? Or I don't remember the name.
I don't think that's his name, and I think he likes to be called Unseen, so I'm not going to go there.
There is some crediting About page. I'll pull it up. I have it right here.
I think that's on the main build of that.
I mean, he told me in private message one time that the reason he chose the name Unseen is because Ingo, because he doesn't want his name or personal information out there. So
well, there is an About menu that says copyright 2015 to 2016 by Ingo Korb, ingo@akana.de.
And in fairness, Bob, the only reason people know my first name is because you kept fucking saying it liberally. So let's just be let's get all the fucking disclosures out of the way.
Whatever, Zach Tard. And now that I think about it, though, in the GitHub, Unseen Ingo puts his full name in his own GitHub. So
because to to comply with like real copyright, you need to have
Right.
Oh.
like some legal name, right?
Anyway,
You
point
I
can't
hope
is-
it's an
just-
anagram. I hope it's a fun anagram for something.
Guess the
else.
city he lives in, and I'll give you $1,000.
It-
At any rate,
It does have the information of who created it, but it doesn't have a copy of the licensing information anywhere.
well,
So they're not compliant,
Yeah.
basically.
Well, the reason I even initially asked that question, I mean, it's the license is the license, and evidently it can be interpreted and very liberally, and there's very little that you have to do to really honor, or I guess, or be in compliance with the licensing. It's not a question of whether or not if you make a change, if you make an improvement. If you release that and say, guys, I fixed something or I made this improvement, here it is, everybody enjoy it. It's not so much that you're not in compliance, you're just kind of being a cunt. I hate to use that word, but it's more of a moral quandary, I guess. Do you guys feel, from a moral or ethical sense that when like if Eon or whoever the Eon, if they've made, code changes, that it would be in good spirit for them to relinquish those and let people see what they've done based on this guy's shit that he's given everyone for free? How do you morally feel about that? I'm really curious about everybody here.
I kind of have an opinion about this, and I have a feeling you guys are all going to disagree with me. I feel like if you spend the time to customize it, and you're still within whatever the rules that were set, and you're selling it, then you could do whatever you want. But
Agreed.
I think that the moment
Yeah.
the moment that you say, all right, I've had enough, or, hey, there's so much competition out there, whatever, I think the moment you're ready to step away, while it's absolutely not required at all, I think the moment you say goodbye is the moment you upload everything and contribute back to open source. But as long as you're doing all of the work and you're putting your money out there and your time and you're risking your income on something, I think as long as you comply with the open source rules, you do whatever you want until it's time to walk away.
Right.
Just my
Absolutely.
opinion.
Okay, good.
I think everybody probably agrees with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
The only other thing that I wanted to mention about this is, the stability brace using the analog port is nice. There is a downside to that because of the fact that, as both Steve and I pointed out, this thing is operating in enhanced DVI mode, which it's sending audio with DVI, and that is not necessarily going to be recognized by every device. In fact, I've seen a video on YouTube, I don't remember which one it was, where that person had to pipe in audio from the analog. So they got video off of, I think it was Zelda XP Pro's device through HDMI, but couldn't get audio. And this prevents you from being able to do that, right? So that is a downside to having this clogging up that port.
Yes,
And
that's a good point.
in the menu, you can even disable enhanced DVI mode for that very reason. I suspect that some devices might crap out, and you have to turn that off in order to get it to even work properly. I suspect that's why that option's in there. So,
Yeah.
but other than that, I think it worked well. I had no problems with it on my set. I was speaking with some other people who gave it a shot with the GBI low latency, and ran into issues with like the current nightly build that Bob links to on his website, but they went back and found an older release, and that worked okay. So I think there's that 240p stuff with the Game Boy loader is a little up in the air. And that reminds me, the one other thing to mention with this is there's no way to firmware update this. So if a bug does come up, you're kind of stuck, right? So
Well, for $150, that's a deal breaker for me, mate. I'm sorry.
yeah, that is, and I think for maybe a lot of people that might be, and yeah,
So
go ahead.
Especially because the duals are coming out for the same or less, and that's the thing that I think that's what all of the streamers
Yeah.
want.
Absolutely.
So Nick, looking at that PCB, I assume one of those headers has got to be the JTAG header. So there is a way for advanced users to upload firmware up there, but there's not an easy way, is what you're saying, right? So,
I was about to say the same thing, but having to Dremel open the case kind of like
Right.
Yeah.
oh yeah, because
Yeah,
you said it was
that-
ultrasonically welded, so yeah, you have to destroy it. Okay.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
the JTAG's exposed on the board, that's fine. But if you can't get if you can't crack the case open reasonably, what's the fucking point?
So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe those are some things that the Eon people could take into account on like another revision, expose, via some like micro USB, so you could do some updating somehow. Or
that's a lot more circuitry. I think at the minimum, if there's a way to bring out the header, then if somebody really wanted update, they can find a way. But putting micro USB circuitry and having an interface with the SPI flash, that's
Not a big. That's not a lot of circuitry. Do a NAND MMC.
to fit in on that board. That board.
Look at the side of that board. Yeah.
well,
No, but no,
you
but
might have
height.
to change something about it. Yeah, that's a fair point. And then you'd have to redo the tooling. So, point taken. But yeah,
And MMC.
some
No
way
concern.
where if you could allow for firmware updates, I think that would be beneficial in the future, and then maybe change the power regulation like Steve was talking about.
I think mostly that the power regulation might be fine. I mean, you'd be more in spec if you used LDO, but I think the biggest concern for me, the biggest thing they could fix, the easiest way is put the damn license agreement on the little manual that they ship, and they solve that problem completely.
Yeah, yeah.
If they're listening, that's the easy thing you can do to fix that.
But yeah, I don't mean to make this like all negative about this thing. Like, it worked really well. It's just I know some people are gonna shrug at the cost 150 because that doesn't end up saving you a whole ton off of the price of GameCube cables. But on the other hand, I'm sure they spent a lot on tooling on this, so they're probably trying to recoup the cost of that, which is fair. And having another solution on the market, in my mind, it only serves to potentially reduce the price of GameCube cables because demand is going to decrease for them. So that's another huge positive of this. Even if you don't want this device, perhaps it ends up resulting in cheaper cube component cables down the line.
I think it's fair to say that a sizable amount of people who want this particular mod for their GameCube are only interested in it because they want the best possible quality of video to play their Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games with the technology that's currently available. I would wager when we get Game Boy Advance, those Game Boy Advance HDMI mods and whatnot. I wonder if demand for this stuff, for the GameCube stuff, will drop drastically or dramatically. I don't know. I kind of think it will. I'm not trying to get a downer.
Yeah, I agree with Zach completely. All I'm interested in this thing is the Game Boy player thing, because if I want to play GameCube games over component, I'm just going to put them into my Wii. Because there's no, I don't think there's any lag, right? You can plug in the original controllers. It feels just like the GameCube, so. It's only for the Game Boy player, in my opinion.
You can't play 16-player Double Dash on
That's
Wii,
true.
man.
You can't link them.
I do have to
I don't
kind of
have
disagree
16
with you, though,
fronts.
Renee, because I think the whole purpose behind GC Video, I think the whole way that Unseen approached this is he created the building blocks for people to do a Wii and a GameCube solution. So I think by people really working on GC Video, we're all just our small little groups. It's not like we're big companies with $1 million budget. I think this is going to lead to a great product. A bunch of people are making them, and then it's going to move on to the Wii. And now, because of this and because of the steps that are taken, I would say probably by the end of 2018, we're going to start to see dual Wii installations that have RGB and HDMI output. So now you're going to get, because of this root work, you're going to get digital to digital HDMI out of your Wii, which also means GameCube games out of your Wii. So I get what you said, but I think the work that's involved in this is a bigger picture type of thing,
If you give a shit about the Wii, I mean, sure.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And I know this is a technical podcast, but I really got to hand it to them for like their design. Like this is really cool, and having the instructions on the bottom and a little manual. I mean, they put some real thought into this, and this thing came folded, but you can bend it up so that you can kind of hang this in the store on the shelves. It's pretty neat. So props to them on putting some serious thought into and money into the designing this thing.
Definitely veterans in product development. It's not novices, I don't think.
No,
I never realized that I would ever care about any of that stuff until I bought my first Oppo Blu-ray player, which was expensive, but it's the only one at the time that you could use a scope and you get bit for bit what's on the disc coming out of the HDMI port. So it was a big deal. It's the first Source Direct thing. And I opened it out of the box, and it was in like the most perfect packaging and like a really nice it had like a carry tote, so when you take it out you have like, you know, it was just one of those things that absolutely blew me away and made me feel like I had just spent the money on something that was worth it. You know, one of those, like, unlike the rectals that just come in like a Ziploc bag thrown into a
You know,
we'll one day be able to upgrade to Ziploc bags. Right now there's
Can I interrupt everyone? I just want to say shout out to Eon in the chat. They're here.
Right.
Oh, nice.
all right.
oh, hey
Cool.
guys, nice to see you.
Congratulations on quite an undertaking here. It's amazing to see something like this come out of nowhere. It's pretty impressive.
Well, you know what it is really for me, though, in a lot of respects is, you know, in this current era that we're all living in, it's nothing but shitty, cloned ass Super Nintendo, Genesis, NES systems that have flooded and saturated the market. It is incredibly refreshing to see a pseudo original product with real new engineering behind it that isn't referencing some cloned ASIC that was produced 15 years ago. I like seeing this stuff, even though if I'm not necessarily going to use it myself, it's just nice to see people putting the real work and the real time in to these really good products. So whether or not I use it or not, it's wonderful to see.
And the real
and
money,
shout
too.
out to Brian from Retro USB. He hasn't been mentioned a lot lately because he's been kind of quiet, but he was one of the ones that stood up too, and he was one of the, you know, the FPGA and S. He was one of the few that stood up and said, you know, fuck your ASIC. I'm going to do this myself, and I'm going to do it right. So we all know Kevin, we all know Unseen, we all know the people making those products, but sometimes we forget about Brian, and we shouldn't.
Yeah, he's a good man. He's a good man.
I like Brian a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, there you have it. Don't you guys feel that way, though? Do you guys just kind of get a little disenfranchised when, you know, you get on YouTube and you're looking at videos and everybody is talking about the same fucking piece of shit clone console that came out, and they make, and you see videos about it for a month, and you think to yourself, God, I know it's the cheap grab, but when are we going to start seeing some good stuff? And stuff like this GameCube thing, often gets overshadowed on these big YouTube channels by some of the shittiest products. And I'm being very candid when I say that, obviously, but I'm sorry, 80% of the stuff that comes out that's new product that's for the vintage scene is ass. It's total shit.
Yeah, that super Well, no, I gotta say, Renee, that Super Trio thing from Retrobit was way worse. There was at least 3 frames of lag in that thing.
Terrible. It's terrible.
And Hyperkin, while I so badly, I'm always this close to shitting on them. You know, I interviewed Chris, and he's genuinely trying his hardest, and he's battling against his whole development team. And all they had to do on their Super Nintendo one, if they had just used a different scaler, it totally would have been fine. You know, it wouldn't have been my go-to choice to play SNES, but if it was one of those things where you just wanted to get into it, you wanted to plug it into your, you know, your HDMI TV, it would have been completely fine if it wasn't for just that one chip they used. Everything else was good enough. So they're getting better, but the other one I tried was way worse.
Well, it's so ridiculous when you look at, you know, there's probably a dozen or so big YouTube channels, and when they do a review of the latest clone console, they talk about all the new stuff and how it's so different. Well, guess what, guys? I take those fuckers apart, and in about 10 seconds, I can tell you immediately that it's the exact same chips, it's the exact same clone ASICs that they've been stuffing into these things since 2006. It ain't anything new. These guys...
I'm kind of surprised that... I mean, at this point, I feel like it should have hit market saturation with the same, you know, variations of this product. I don't really understand how there's still money to be made, honestly. Whereas something like the GameCube stuff is like very much in its infancy. You've got Eon going after it, and Badass Consoles, and that other one, and this is all like relatively recent, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity there for these guys to make some money, but I don't understand how you can make money off of something that there's a bajillion competitors for, and how do you differentiate yourself?
I could tell you exactly. I could tell you exactly the answer to that. It's because classic electronics is becoming exactly like classic cars. It's going to hit a peak and then stay there. It's not going to, it might do one of these, but it's still going to grow. And the more people you see walking into these retro game stores, and the more people who sell this stuff and try to pitch it to you, oh yeah, just go plug it into a TV. That's how it spreads so quickly, and that's why you get guys like Steve, the owner of Brooklyn Video Games. When people come in and ask him about this, when the Super Nintendo Classic came out, he got a lot of people looking for SNES stuff, and he's a great dude. So people would walk in, and he would always say things like, "This is a lot to get into. You're going to spend a lot of money. Why don't you start with this cheap scaler? Because it's cheap. Why don't you get the right RGB cables? You get your console done right. And if that's good enough for you, cool. But if you love it, come back and we'll hook you up with the better stuff." And that's the approach that I love. Because at the end of the day, what are they wasting? $40 on a bad scaler? Out of all the other things that you could be buying, that's nothing. And you're still pointing people in the right direction. Sorry to call you out, Steve. I know you like to be a little laid back. I love that approach, and there's so many of these generic game stores that just, where there's 20 of them that do the same thing, and they're just like, oh, yeah, we have the perfect solution for you. Here, check this out. And then that's it.
I think you're 110% wrong, and I'll explain it to you why.
I can't wait to hear it.
No, I'm not saying that in a cunning way. I think you're totally off base on this. And I don't think it's the brick-and-mortar stores that are perpetuating or driving the sales of these shitty consoles. This is 90% controlled by YouTube channels. This is 90% propagated by YouTube channels. When Hyperkin or the Super Shit Retro Trio, whenever those guys send out Retrobit, I'm sorry. Whenever they send out a mass chain email to the elitist accolades of YouTube reviewers, and they're like, guys, we have just made the biggest piece of shit of the 21st century. We are sending you all one. Review it. It's free. Enjoy. That is what's perpetuating these shitty consoles and their outstanding sales. It's all done by word of mouth through these YouTube channels that people watch because, well, they talk about video games. They must they have to know about this hardware and if it's good or not. That's how these things keep getting made. You
could be right because the store that I've gone into by me, those guys are the same way as kind of Bob describes. Like they'll be totally honest with you. I mean they're carrying the Retron 5, but they'll be like, this thing sucks. Like, don't buy this. So
yeah, well, you're right, Zach. I didn't want to get into that because I don't want to start drama. But there is that.
It's not drama, Bob.
There's one guy that started out who seemed like a very genuine guy. And then it's that same thing. I completely understand this because I'm on the failing end of this right now, where you get to do this stuff and you love it, but you need to make a living off of it. And the same reason I'm not a famous heavy metal guitarist is the same reason I'm failing at retro RGB is because I will never fucking sell out. I will never sit here and say, Corona is the best beer I've ever drank. Like, fuck you. I'm going to say what I feel. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, whatever. But there was that one guy who has a lot of followers who started. I think our review came out within a few days of each other of the NES Hyperkin console, and his was before mine. And he talked about how great it was and about how he loved it and it was the perfect thing. And I just broke it down as, if you just buy a composite clone console, you're gonna get a better experience than this piece of shit. And I know that I can understand what that's like, but I will never do that. I would rather sit there and take take turns having you guys punch me in the face than lie about something like that.
Well, let's just be very clear about this. I mean, and I respect your position on this, Bob, but brick and mortar stores aren't setting the course for the mass selling of these shitty consoles. It's all coming from.
We agree on that point.
He just conceded that.
Yeah. Let me just play devil's advocate for a second before we move on, because we don't have to repeat the diatribe. There is, I think it's wrong to lump all the YouTube channels together on that. Not every single YouTube channel is going after the market of people that want an in-depth technical review. They just want to know, is this going to play my games? There is a large segment of the population that is not interested in how many frames of lag that a console produces. And
Totally right.
I'm not ascribing ill intent to those YouTubers who don't do a in-depth technical breakdown of these things. That content should be out there, and if people are interested in it, go find it. You can go get that type of review and make your decision based on that. But maybe you don't care about that, so I don't know that there's anything wrong with that. Of course,
Agreed, 100%.
Of course there are people out there who have the, use my coupon code so that I get a cut type thing deals and are not going to be fair. But let's not assume that everybody out there is like that.
Well, I think that's pretty self-evident, Nick. I certainly wasn't trying to paint every YouTuber with
want
that
to be
broad brush, but
Yeah.
I
basically,
just want to be clear about it. Yeah.
Just to summarize this, take what I said, and if they close their video, or if the bottom of their video description, if there's an affiliate Amazon link, you just got fucked.
Yeah.
Back out. Back the fuck out. That's all I'm saying. I'm done.
Let's go on to who wants to give the summary of the what TerraOnion is doing. I know Bob kind of gave us the talk in his.
I think Zach should do it because he's the one that redesigned it.
Dude, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What?
We were going to talk about kind of the recall that TerraOnion's doing with the SSDS3, and kind of
Super seedy.
Kind of give people an overview of what happened there and how they're remedying it, and then maybe talk more generally about how do you decide to do a recall like that.
Well, I can tell you about my involvement.
Sure, I'd be interested to hear it.
Well, I was contacted by Alex over Skype, and he asked me if I would talk to him and Miguel, I think is the engineer's name, because they were having trouble. And so I spoke to...
Like, at a high level, give an overview of what the trouble was, just in case people don't know.
Yeah, if you give me a goddamn second.
I just want to make sure.
Jesus fucking Christ, dude. You're killing me. So anyway, the purpose of them contacting me was that there were two issues. There were two issues with the Super SD3. The first issue that people were being most affected by was an issue where the sync triggering, where sync wasn't being properly triggered by a variety of analog CRTs and even scalars, right? So they that's issue number one. Issue number two, they were having all of their analog stuff, their sound and their video was referencing the digital return or the digital ground, and it wasn't referencing the analog section. So that was causing, if your video was working and your device did agree with the sync pulses being parsed through, you may see a lot of visual distortions and errors, noise in the video, and you may hear a noise in the audio because of this. Now, I mentioned both of these things. There's this, just more context. People immediately made a thread on Shmups. And to be honest with you, 80% of the people who were participating on this thread complaining were fucking assholes, and they weren't helping them in any respect at all.
It was bad.
I skimmed that, and yeah, it kind of angered me.
The only thing I'm going to comment on in this one, the one that really made me angry was that one guy that was so over the top brutal. He was the reason I jumped in was because of this horrible human, and then he finally the mod on that forum finally muted him, and that same guy went to a different forum and pretended to be on their side after he was so horrible on the other forum. Oh, I hate that stuff so much. Those are the type of people that never leave their caves that they fucking dwell in, because if they were ever out in... First of all, if they were out in sunlight, they'd probably burst into flames because their skin hasn't been outside ever. But like those people can't deal with real life, and it bothers me to death because it's
just not helpful, right? Like,
no, and it sucked for TerraOnion too, because they're taking so much shit, and then they go to another forum and everybody just
it
doesn't even
clogs
mention
up
it.
It makes it hard to distill down to the 20% of leftover people that are actually trying to just make a product better. And if you are the TerraOnion team and you come onto this forum and you see a bunch of people just taking horrible shots at you, your body is naturally going to start reacting. Your heart rate's going to go up. Your adrenaline's going to rush, and you're not going to spend the time to read those good quality posts that could help you solve whatever you're going through.
So anyways,
so Zach, can I get clarification from you on one detail? The sync thing and the noise thing, you said it was on the video. Is that on the composite video, the RGB video, both, one of them?
Well, it's on they have an RGB circuit on board, and so their RGB
there's composite out on the back too, isn't there?
Yes.
Like
yes.
Is that affected?
Yes.
So that probably doesn't have the sync problems though, right? Because
the composite video doesn't have the sync issue.
But it has a noise issue, right?
Yes.
I'm concerned about both video outputs. I know everybody talks just about the RGB, but I think it's important.
Yeah, the composite comes out straight out of the TurboGrafx, so it already has the sync embedded. So.
Right. It just needs you just have to finish the composite circuit by coupling it and whatever. But
you have to amplify it.
Yeah. So what happened was people were being really shitty on this thread, right? Being really shitty, and I knew exactly what the problems were. I knew exactly what both problems were because I know a lot about the PC Engine because I've designed a lot of shit for the PC Engine. So trying to be helpful, I put out some models, and I said, the first thing was if you want to drive the video without having to worry about doing all this attenuation bit, you want to use Genesis cables, right? Because the whole sell for this thing was with the Super SD System 3, you could use an unmodified Genesis Model 2 cable, and that would seamlessly work. Well, it wouldn't work because the video circuit that they put on this thing doesn't shape and attenuate the amplitude properly so that it would interface correctly with the Sega Genesis RGB cable. Not a big deal. I think they should have fixed that. They didn't. Doesn't matter. That's not the issue we're talking about. So the sync issue that they were having was they were using combinational logic, and they were taking horizontal and vertical sync pulses because those are exposed on the expansion bus. And they were using combinational logic to combine those, and then they were inverting, and they were doing a couple of little things to make their own C-sync. Well, the problem with that is if you look at the sync pulses, both horizontal, vertical, and C-sync, they're slightly out of spec. Horizontal H-sync pulses are too fat. They're too wide, kind of like my ass. Vertical and the falling edges don't match. They're not in sync. They're not. Yeah. The falling edges aren't in time with one another too. They're slightly off. They're slightly adrift. The solution to that is stop using horizontal and vertical. Just drive the C-Sync pin that's already there for you, amplify that to whatever you need it to, and use it. Okay, that's what the problem was. That's been fixed. They verified that. That's fine. They're like, what about the noise? Well, the noise, 90% of that is being caused by the ground that you're referencing for your analog video. Can you tell me if and I said this in the forum long before we had this conversation because everyone was stumped on this, and I said, well, can somebody look and see if the analog and digital grounds are combined on the Super SD board side? And can anyone verify if the analog video section is referencing the analog ground as well as the sound? Well, it turns out that the board combine both the analog and digital grounds. So that was another issue. So I said, well, this is why this is happening. This is why this is happening. Pull those grounds out of circuit, and they did. And then they separated analog and digital. All of that went away. All of that went away. So they spun up a new board revision based on suggestions, I guess, that I made. I worked very closely with them through Skype on why, not only just telling them, but explaining to them why this is happening. And I've not had much communication, but they were really nice to me. They even sent me a unit, a defective unit, for free. And Alex and Miguel, Miguel is he seems to be a very good engineer for sure. It was just a small mistake. It was a combination or a series of very small mistakes. And yeah, it affected the device, but I don't think people were being very fair to them. And I think people were treating them pretty shitty over some really small stuff that could be easily remedied. It's people say digital stuff is really hard and blah, blah, blah. I agree, digital stuff is hard, but analog will get you every time if you're not careful.
Oh, yeah.
Analog will get you every time. So talk to me next time. But at any rate, that was my involvement with the Super SD team. I helped them fix both of those issues. They were nice to me. I don't have anything bad to say. I think people were a little rude to them. And from what I understand, everything's going to be good with the new board revision they've got spinning up here.
Yeah, so we should talk about that because so what they have decided to do is have people ship the boards back to them if they're having issues, right? And
not the boards, the whole unit.
The whole unit, but they're going to replace the board, right?
Yeah.
And there's going to be a recall. It might just be the board, but they basically said it's 4 to 6 weeks before they could even get the boards in their hands to test. So they politely asked, like, everybody just chill out for a minute. We're halting shipments. Anybody that's gotten one will get taken care of. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm actually, somebody just asked in the chat, I'm actually kind of curious where they lost their shit in all of this. And I think it might be just like Zach was talking before, where everybody was harping on them on the forums, and they couldn't, or Nick was talking about, I guess, and they couldn't tell who was serious and who was not, and it kind of sucked because I think they just put up this big wall, and it was like, and just like backed themselves into a corner and started swinging. And look, I completely know what that's like, both literally and figuratively, by the way, but I wish people weren't such assholes to them on forums, because I feel like it could have all been avoided. Then I had many email exchanges with Alex through all this, and he was so nice in all the emails, so I didn't really understand where that came from. The only email he was ever mean to me is when I asked him if he stole Beast's footage, and he said yes, and then was like a dick about it. That's the only time. That's the only time that he was ever rude. So I feel really bad. I just honestly think that they made a mistake. They're just a couple of guys. It's not a team of people with a development and Q&A side. They don't have millions of dollars pumped into this. We all know as retro gaming fans, we're early adopters. This is what we got to deal with. So it just sucked that they took all that.
Let's remember, everybody on forums equates to like 5% of the
right. Yeah, it's not representative, but that's where those guys have chosen to do business.
Maybe what happens is they might have gotten really emotional because they spent all this this time and effort and sweat into developing a PC Engine interface that can emulate the CD and that can load Hue cards from the back and so on, and then the whole internet's going crazy about a few simple analog details, right? So they might have gotten emotional because of that. So.
The secondary purpose is all the unit is all that. Yeah,
and so many people forgot the whole point that the first run of a product, the first run of a brand new product, the amount of complaints that had to do with ROM cart or optical drive emulation, and ODE is harder than ROM cart. There was like a couple, and most of them I think were already either fixed or they know how to fix it and they're implementing it. So like that's fucking awesome. So it does suck.
Yeah, and we should talk about that. I mean, first product runs. I mean, none of us. I mean, it's very, very rare to spin up a PCB and get it right the first time, right? That barely happens. And I have an example in my hands right here. This is a new design I'm working on, and all those yellow wires are mistakes that I've made because you can't get shit right the first time because you're a fucking idiot and you connect chip enable to output enable and bullshit like that, right? But what I want to get to with that is, even if you don't get it right, a lot of products will ship with factory mods. Like even a lot of Genesis consoles that, like we've been talking about in our private chat, they've shipped with factory mods. That's okay. You need to accept that you made mistakes, you fix it, and you ship it out to the customer. That's it. That's all.
Yeah, in fact, I've mentioned my Genesis on here before. It has what's known as the Zenith mod, where I actually had to ship my Genesis into a local place where they went and installed a daughter board. So it's like an official hacked mod on there that messes with the sync circuit to make the Genesis compatible with Zenith equipment, because there were issues with it back in the day.
And that's not even a mistake. That's something you just can't test
foresee.
for in development until it's out in the field. And then you're having everybody testing stuff with all their different various equipment, and then that's when something like that pops up.
Right, so, but as a consumer, it's for your average consumer, there's no difference. I paid $200-$300 for something, and it's not working, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's the only reason I think René mentioned it in the same.
I thought I was going to bring it up regardless, because I thought that it's very valuable that, like, no matter how 100% correct everything is, it's probably the Zenith mod, I think, made the sync out of spec to make it work.
Yeah.
So I just think it's interesting.
It's definitely
twist on all
out of spec.
Yeah.
The OSSC does not work very well with it.
Let's not forget, though. I mean, they made a product. There's some things that they're having to address, but they didn't take people's money and run and shut the doors down. I mean, at least if they're fixing this stuff, they're resolving these issues, and they're trying to get a good product out to people. So
they'll probably take a financial hit for this.
Yeah, they're eating the cost of their mistakes, and they're going to pay for it dearly, and they're going to have the scar tissue to prove it. So I think, I understand people are upset, but try to keep context into that, because they're really taking a hit to make sure everybody gets something good. That's the last thing I wanted to say about it.
I think what I wanted to say is I don't even think it's that big of a mistake. Do you guys think this should have been?
Bottom line is they sold something that said if you use a Genesis 2 RGB cable, it's going to work, and it didn't.
Yeah,
so it's a big mistake.
I think as the price of your product goes up, you take on exponentially more risk with these kind of things, right? So had this been a $25 product, I think people would have been a lot more understanding, but people spent a lot of money on this thing. So not that doesn't excuse people going into the forums and acting like idiots, but just to say that I think the fact that it's a premium priced product kind of is one of the reasons for the outlash, and those people are shooting themselves in the foot. As I said before, I mean, just reiterating my point, had you not made a bunch of over exaggerated noise about this and just stuck to let's get this fixed, I think the team could have been quicker and more responsive to the criticism, and all this could have been solved. But
I think you hit two things on the head there. If this was a $100 product, which it can't be, it's too advanced for that, but if this was a $100 product, I would be telling everybody to shut the fuck up and enjoy their ROM cart and ODE, and then go get, a Voultar or a DB Electronics mod for their console, and that's it. But the fact that you spent that much money on it is definitely a thing. And the way that they handled the people who constructively criticized it, it left a bad taste in my mouth, and it's it just, when people start lying about stuff, that really hits home with me, because mistakes, we are all human, whether we pretend Voultar like we're better than that or not, but like we're all just human beings. We all fucking make mistakes, and everybody is absolutely receptive to that, especially in small projects.
I don't.
But blatant lies is where I really Like if you lied, because to me that means if you made a mistake about this, you're a human. But if you lied intentionally, what else have you lied about? I would never think like if you made a mistake about this, what else have you made a mistake on? That never enters my brain. But a blatant and deliberate lie, that's where I'm like, well, what else are we lying about here then?
Well,
If you could so blatantly do this.
It turned into such it was really an unfortunate event because there was a guy was saying that specifically me and Bob and everybody on this thing were being really hard on them and cornering them and being dicks, and like, do you
None of us
realize
were.
I'm the person that helped them fix their shit? Why would I be mean
Yeah.
with them? It's
I
like
literally told, I got 5,000 followers on YouTube, which is not RGT 85 status of YouTubers, all right, but it's still good enough. And I told all of them, if you're angry, to troll me instead of them because they need time to cool off and do their thing. We both jumped in to try our best to help, and we both got nailed for it. And I ignored it because I genuinely don't give a flying fuck about these things, but it still just rubbed me the wrong way. When they started trolling, fine. I asked them to do that. When they started lying, that's when I was like, ooh, you shouldn't lie about things that I have screenshots of. Like, that's just not making you look good.
yeah. It's just it's just unfortunate. I mean, that's really nothing left to say. It's just
So I have, well, I'm actually most curious, probably about René and maybe a little bit Zach. Like, have you thought about, is there any case that could lead to you to doing a recall? Like, and how would you approach that? How would you make that decision?
Is there any sort of scenario where I would have to leverage a recall? I can't think of anything that would really force. Okay, so let's say that for some reason I spin up some sort of design and I sell it. I sell 200 of them, but I don't test it before I sell it thoroughly enough, and I have to recoup. There is a very I have to do something. It's a very clear disclaimer on all of my do-it-yourself products. I'm not responsible if you fuck this up when you install it. And because there's no way I can provide any validity to the fact that if you did or didn't fuck this board up when you input it in your PC Engine, there's no liability for me. But if it comes out to where I fucked up a route or something like that, I would totally offer a money back. I would just I would take the fiscal. I would take the financial hit, and I would either refund people, or I would say if you can wait for just a couple of weeks, I will have a corrected board sent to you. Just give me a couple of weeks to get them spun up and from Chinaland, and I would always take care of people if I fuck somebody up like that. Now, from what I understand, they are actually going to be TerraOnion will be raising the price of this device as a result of them having to take the fiscal hit. Now, I don't think money's money, but man, I would feel personally, I don't know if I could do that. I mean, I would feel bad. I worry about shit all night long anyways. I don't sleep if there's an order left or if there's something that's hanging in the balance that I've not done, if someone's console is here, as buried as I am and stuff. If I had to take more of people's money for something that I screwed up, it's not that it's a bad thing, but it would just not settle with me well, and I don't know if I could. I don't know if I could do that.
How do you know that that's the reason that it's going on? Maybe they realized they underestimated their costs.
It's
in
possible.
general.
Yes.
It's possible.
So that's the only reason I'm going to disagree with you is if they did this out and they said, okay, well, this is how much it costs to make, this is how much money we could make and still make it feasible to do, and they did not factor in anything going wrong, which I did this in my last company where, the one guy he's been doing this forever, great guy, was like, we need to factor in X amount of dollars for mistakes. I'm like, what do you mean mistakes? Fuck you, I worked my ass off on this. No, UPS drops a pallet of computers that we lose. Like, there are so many things involved. So they could have done a great job figuring out exactly how much they could sell this for to make a good amount of money, but forgot to factor in something going wrong. So while I agree and disagree in that maybe the price would have been that, or maybe the problem is that the price should have been higher since day one. So
Well, I'll put it to you this way, Bob. I think
both
it's
sides.
I think it's equally as plausible. I think it's just as plausible that the price is going up as a result of this, and I think it's just as plausible that the price is going up because they underestimated certain operating costs from the get-go. Either way, it doesn't really matter. I just use that as an example. I mean, where do you draw the line, I guess? And that was sort of Nick's question too. I mean, I don't. That's a really tough one. I have very, very inexpensive parts and kits here that I sell to people. I don't have a $330 apparatus that I'm turning out for people to buy. René has a product that's not that expensive, but his products are typically more expensive than mine. So, maybe he's better suited to sort of talk about that.
Well, I've never had to do a recall, obviously, but my approach has always been, someone contacts me and they say their unit's not working, I just tell them, ship it back and I'll send you a brand new one, and that seems to have worked 100% of the time. I will, and I'll say the majority of the time the unit comes back, it's working just fine, and I'll say, okay, whatever, and I'm not gonna laugh at the person's face or anything, so I'll send them a new one still, and they're perfectly happy, and that's resolved 100% of my cases so far. But if we're actually going to go and suppose that I do sell something that is not working as advertised, I do have to take the financial hit, because as a seller, it's my responsibility to make sure that whatever comes out of my shop here has been 100% tested and is, compliant to the specifications that I said it was compliant to, right? If I said you can, plug this into your TurboGrafx and get S video out of it, well, you better get S video out of it, otherwise I haven't done my job properly, and that's 100% my fiscal responsibility to take care of if I mess that up.
So there's two different things. There's a design flaw and there's production yield problems, right? I think it's interesting to analyze the actual case here with the system we're talking about. How many percentage of people actually use the RGB, which seems like is the only one that's effective, versus people using composite? How many units do you think are out there? I think it'd be interesting.
Less than 100.
Ballpark it.
I'm 99% sure. I could be wrong, but I think the first order was for 250, and they'd only shipped out the first part of the first order, so it's actually not terrible. It's not as bad as when I the other week. That was a very personal and very fucking horrible story I told. That where I shipped out thousands of computers that all had a problem. That if I was better, I could have fixed it. It was a mistake that so many people would have made. But if I was better, I could have prevented it from happening. And I had to look at my guys and say, now you have to get in a car and drive to these places to fix this. And I had to get on the phone with the customers and sit in the meeting and be in a room. Unlike these fucking forum trolls, I had to be in a room with people that paid a lot of money for shit that they depended on me for, look them in the eye and told them I fucked up, and now I'm going to try my best to make it better. And that's why I was so sympathetic to those guys, because that is not a good feeling at all. That really sucks. And whether it's 100 or 1,000 or 2,000, it's the same depending on scalability. I had a company and a team of people. If it was me and a buddy, 100 would be just as hard as 1,000. So that's why I'm kind of so I don't want to say on their side, but I'm so defensive of them in this,
Well, you're sympathetic to their situation based on similar circumstance.
Yeah. Yeah,
I get it. I'm with you.
I mean, based on that info, the numbers you gave, even though I still think this is a minor flaw, in my view, I still think because there was so little units shipped and that a lot of the people would probably be using the RGB output that they shipped to, that it was probably worth offering, a recall on that.
Oh, I think it was the right move. Absolutely.
It's interesting.
But if the numbers were different, I don't know if I would agree.
Well,
I think that's a huge factor.
I've had people email me and ask me if I mean, I could certainly do it, but they've asked me if I would take their Super SD3, sort of rip out the RGB circuit that's in there, and just kind of patch and fix my circuit into the thing so that it would work well. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that because one, it's somebody else's product, and B, they're going to have a much better solution. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's going to be a much better solution. I think, my circuit's pretty fucking good, but would you consider everyone that's bought one of these really an early adopter? Where it's not like a Steam game sale where it's told you in bold lettering that you are an early adopter. Expect bugs. I mean, is it really fair to sort of ascribe that because I bought this and it just came out, I'm an early adopter, so I'm expect bugs.
I don't think it's black and white. I think there's some like middle ground.
No, actually, Zach, I think it's wrong to do that. And I think if I were the person in that situation, I would literally say, I have a bunch of betas. Who wants to be a beta tester? If it fucks up, I'll replace it, but you got to pay for shipping. Who's down? And I guarantee you the same people that bought that thing would have still bought it. It would have just been a lot less stressful because everybody would have been in it. We're all in this together now. I told you what the story is. If you have a problem, fuck off. But like, no, that is, yeah, I'm strong feeling about that one, I guess.
The same people would have complained in the same amount as well, in the same volatility.
If that's the case, then I would have just been like, fuck all you guys and ignored you. If I told you, Steve, I have the greatest thing in the world for you right now, you're going to love it. It's a Sapporo thing, never gets cold, and it showed up warm, I deserve that shit. But if I said I'm going to send you a warm Sapporo and you were mad that it was warm, fuck you.
So the argument, the reason I ask this is because I've seen this argument's been heavily used for this Super SD System 3 thing, is that, well, you're an early adopter, so don't bitch, you should have expected bugs. I don't think anyone was ever to the understanding that they were early adopters. This was a product that was ready to go. Yeah. I mean, right?
Yeah, you have to advertise that as a beta.
Yeah.
So let's.
You have to have some, like, you have to be a little bit reasonable.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just be like, you should have got everything right on the first try.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You have to have some reason if you buy something early. Just a little bit. Right. And give some slack.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all.
So, I've had a question I've been wanting to ask you fuckers since the last one. And I don't think this one's going to be too long. So could I change the subject and ask a question?
Yeah, just a heads up that I think YouTube is having some problems. I mean, we're getting green on stream health on the dashboard and on OBS.
And I have the YouTube, the actual YouTube stream up next to the Skype window, and it's been fine for me the whole time. Not any stuttering.
Yeah, so
mine's choppy.
Some people are having issues. This actually happened to another live stream that I was watching earlier in the day by someone else. We'll just have to deal with it, and I guess people can watch the recorded one if there is one. But just keep that in mind. But yeah, go ahead, Bob.
All right, so if you have any CRT display, so let's just say it's a high quality one like a BVM, and your display is blurry, and you go and recap the whole thing, you calibrate it. Most often, it's going to look great now. Why is it that tubes get blurry? Is it the electron guns actually wearing out? Is it the three colors being out of alignment? What makes a tube blurry? Assuming please assume that everything else around it's perfect. What actually makes the tube wear out in a tube TV?
Two things: passive component wear and harmonic vibration.
Please elaborate.
Okay, so harmonic vibration is a phenomenon where you have things vibrating at a very, very high frequency as a result.
Yeah, I fucking know what that is, but how does that apply to the tube, you dick?
Well, if you'd let me answer you fucking alcoholic cunt. I'm trying to explain it to you, but your fucking feeble mind just can't grasp what I'm saying. So basically what I'm saying, Bob, is for as far as the harmonic vibration is concerned, you have things operating in the 15 kilohertz space, and there is a subtle vibration as a result of that. So after years and years, Bob, you have on the back of your tube a yoke. The yoke helps keep convergence and beam landing in order. Now, if this is vibrating for 10 or 15 years at a very high frequency, what's going to happen is these little rings on the neck of the CRT are going to begin to shift. And so when these rings begin to shift, the positioning of the electron guns, Bob, become askewed. So that is why a lot of the times it's not your caps, it's the positioning difference, or it's the change of position of your yoke and all of the adjusting components on the back of the neck of the CRT. It's high frequency vibrations over years.
And is there no way to fix this?
Well, a lot of TD manufacturers to help fight against that pot the yoke and the adjustment and the convergence adjustment rings with an epoxy material. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there's a lot of heat back there, and that epoxy material can literally erode away and offer no structural support to where you could just literally flake that shit off after about 15 years. So, really, the only thing that you can do, Bob, is nothing. I mean, CRTs probably need a good beam landing adjustment every 15 years, 10 or 15 years, depending on use.
Okay. I wrote a blog post about adjusting those convergence rings on a PVM that I own, and it's exactly like what Zach is saying, is that those are epoxied in. They're factory calibrated, but after 20, 30 years, that calibration is not good anymore, because that epoxy is worn out, it's dried up, those rings have moved, and if anyone's going to go and try to adjust those rings, it's fucking hard. Yeah. It's completely unintuitive how those rings affect the R, the G, and the B guns. It's a really difficult job. Like, I like to think I'm skilled in electronics, and it took me hours to touch those 6 rings and to get it reasonably right to where I thought the monitor was acceptable. So I wouldn't recommend for anyone that to actually go and touch those rings if they've never touched a soldering iron or anything like that before, because 1, it's dangerous, and 2, it takes a long time, and you might fuck it up much more than you'll actually improve it.
That's right.
So that would actually then explain why so BVMs were always designed for service, right? So I'm not, this is 100% speculation, but you spend $50,000 on a monitor, and all of a sudden you have a tech showing up every 3 years to fix it. Sony might have been able to help that in some cases, but it was all part of the process, right? But one of the things that always blew me away is when a tube was bad, a tube was bad. And that was probably wrong. Not bad, but when a tube wore out, a tube wore out. And I was always wondering why there wasn't a procedure for that. And, I get the one side of it. Oh, yeah, replace the slide-in cards that any idiot could do. Fine. I do get the recapping of the cards in the main board, although there's only like 20 caps on the main board. I just never understood why you wouldn't have a tech fix the tube, and you just answered why. So, but does that mean that theoretically, if you had a tube expert, which I would never even try, never, but theoretically, you would actually be able to repurpose a lot of these tubes?
It depends on what the problem is. I mean, if it's a convergence or geometry issue, most likely yes. But we have to remember what causes. There are a few things that cause CRT tubes disintegrate in a variety of different ways. The phosphor coating on the inside has its own degrading sort of element, but a lot of times tubes internally, even though they're vacuum sealed, they develop shorts. What is a short inside inside a CRT tube? It could be literally a micron-sized speck of dust that can fuck the whole thing up. So when you have situations like that, the only way you can really repurpose and save those tubes is if you have a tube rejuvenator that basically blasts a shit ton of voltage through the tube to remove certain little specks of shit that could cause shorts within the tube. Tubes may fail because they wear out. Tubes may fail because they've got a little piece of shit stuck in them that just needs burned the fuck out. And if you rejuvenate it, you can have a tube that's perfectly brand new and that'll last another 25 years.
That's a great answer. So I guess if this, I hope this isn't a hard question then, is there an easier way to tell if you walk up to any CRT, consumer grade, monitor, whatever it is, are there telltale signs of what is a tube issue and what is a capacitor issue?
Listen
And
to
there
me
are
very
some.
carefully.
Geometry, like that bloop, 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 bloop thing, that's capacitors most of the time, right?
Here's how you tell the big difference, Bob. And this is not really technical, but I mean, I want to break this down like a sexy man. On the back of the neck board, on the back of the neck beard, you'll probably have 3 transistors that are very, very large. I want you to take a piece of heavy conductor wire. You won't get shocked, probably. Tie one end of this conductor to ground, and then take the other conductor and short it to the base of. You've got 3 transistors that drive red, green, and blue. Short the ground the base of each of these transistors. When you do that, the tube will illuminate full red, full green, full blue. Doesn't matter anything else if you can. I mean, it doesn't matter. The purpose is to see if the tube is going to fully draw a red, green, and blue screen. Now, if you can do that, and you've got red looks great, and then you go and short the transistor that drives blue, and then blue comes out, and it looks great, and then you go to green, and it looks like shit. You have a tube problem that more than likely cannot be remedied by any sort of adjustments, whether they be physical adjustments, replacing physical components. There is a problem with that gun, and that's the best way I can tell you how to really differentiate between tube problems that you probably can't solve without a rejuvenator, and two problems that can be resolved by either calibrations or replacing capacitive components that have just age-worn. Make sense?
Yeah, fucking awesome answer. Do you guys concur?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, that works.
I'm not experienced in this stuff.
I'll believe it.
Defer
I'll believe it.
to his wisdom.
What you need to do is post it on a forum, and then it's definitely going to be the right answer.
Yeah. I told you I stopped doing TV stuff because a guy emailed me and said he got really hurt. And,
Yeah, I'd feel bad about that. I don't want anything to do with that.
yeah.
I'd feel bad depending on who the guy is.
Let's answer a couple of questions and save the majority of them for next time when we're not having horrible stream issues. Here's one for Voultar. Do you know of anyone planning to produce your Amiga floppy interface? Or are you planning to produce it, or is it just open source?
I banged that thing out like a year ago, and I printed a few out, and they work great, but I just don't have the time, or quite frankly, the resources or interest to spin those up and provide those. So since I'm unable to do that, you can print those and you can configure, you can assemble those yourself. Maybe somebody would do that for you. I'm not going to do that because I just don't have the time.
Okay, you don't know of anybody planning to do that, so all right.
Matt Buxton seemed kind of interested in it. Maybe he'll offer my little board on his on the video game perfection thing, which would be totally cool.
So your Gerbers are available for everyone then?
My Gerbers are available for everybody. That is right.
Okay. Excellent.
You should get an Oshawa number for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Maybe. If the money's right.
And put a license there, and then so
people can forget to distribute the license with it when they sell it.
Exactly. No, it's better to make it clear what you want to happen instead of ambiguous.
Yeah, you want to do that for me, Steve? You go ahead. I don't want to fuck with any of that. So
I'll help you.
No, you can do it.
Right.
Next question. Next question, please.
There's a question for DJ Muehlberg. Dude, where did you get those Sonic 1 remixes in the beginning of the video? This was from the previous stream we did. I don't remember where I got those. I don't know. Steve, you didn't send me that music, did you? It's like a live band playing Sonic 1 songs. I've had those forever. I have no idea where I got them from, but if anyone in the stream knows, where that's from. I would love to know myself, because that's really awesome versions of those songs.
We were hoping that the copyright notice would go off on them, and then you would know.
Yeah, exactly. I gotta. Although you usually just get a claim from like a big mega corp that has the rights, and you don't see artist names. So should we do one more? Does splitting or combining audio with RCA Y-splitter have the same risk of problems or damage occurring as splitting video in a similar way?
Splitting or combining?
Splitting
Both?
or combining, yeah.
So splitting audio, the audio is high impedance on the output or on the destination. So as long as it's line level audio, then I don't see a problem.
Quieter.
No, barely, because it's going to be high impedance. Like your source impedance is like less than 1K, and your load impedance is like greater than 10K. It's going to be barely quieter. I think that's the whole point of line level audio. For combining like left and right into mono, I also don't have a problem with it. Bob had something in his podcast today where somebody linked to some audio website, but there was a problem I had. Well, there was a problem that they were discussing 1/4-inch like stereo plugs,
Right.
and the issue was combining with the possibility that somebody could plug a mono plug in and somebody could plug a stereo plug in. But if you reduce it into mono, which would be mono on each of those two inputs, which would be a white and a red combining into a mono RCA. In terms of RCA, if you notice, there were series resistors in there, and the source device is supposed to have series resistance on line level audio. And actually, this is one of the things I kind of always rail about whenever I hear the Mega Amp mentioned, is that the default schematic has no series resistance on the outputs. And it's actually one of the fixes, but one of the things we thought ahead of time when we made our second revision of the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo cables is I put series resistance in for those situations where sources or somebody doing a mod or something to their console, and they're not putting like just a basic amount of series resistance in to prevent issues when either combining or when you're doing RCA and you're tapping the center with the outside as you're plugging stuff in, you're having a small short to ground when you're doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's another. You just want to have some sort of series resistance on the output. It's usually like between like 200 and 1K. And I know on René's implementation of that, he put like a 300 or 330 or something. And then Zach said when he's making the schematic for Ace, he's going to throw in some series resistance on the Mega Amp. But as long as you got some series resistance, which if a device is designed properly would, then I don't see a problem with combining RCA stereo into a mono.
I wanted to make sure that was taken in context. So in the context of, would I ever take, an analog video signal, like an RGB signal or a component, and split it to two? No. Would I combine them into one? I want to ask you that question in a second. But would I take a stereo audio line level and combine it into, just with a Y cable? I have never seen from both literal testing or any other kind of technical analysis of it, any side effects of that. Just simply line level. But I'm not talking about all audio. I'm just talking about, like, if you take the rectals and you take left and right audio and you put them into mono, like, if you have stuff like that with band equipment, if you were to ever use a Y cable with like a 150 watt guitar amp head and you try to split it with a Y cable to two cabs, you're going to blow it up. There's a very big, there's documentation right on the amp, right on everything else, how you want the impedance to be, ohms, whatever you want to put it at. So just in the context of going from stereo into mono into any device, whatever. But what I was also curious of is a lot of these PVMs have inputs and outputs. So what if you hooked like a SNES into the input and a Genesis into the output, and you only have one powered at the same time?
Then you still have the same the same problem of the powered one leaking into the unpowered one.
And what are the effects of that? Is it just a possible signal degradation, or could you possibly like hurt something?
I mean, it's possible, but not likely to hurt something. But you will get some sort of loss because the current is going to go through the internal 75 ohm on the monitor, and then also going to go, some of it's going to go into the unpowered console.
So I guess I know this is a little bit off topic, but based off of that, why is it that PVMs, you could just plug things into the input, and on BVMs, you have to have that 75 ohm termination on the output side, or else you'll get a very bright picture? I'm assuming it's because the termination's done on the inside of the PVMs. But
usually, like the PV, you're talking about the PVMs that have an in and then that out.
Right.
They have a switched BNC jack where normally it's terminated to ground, but if you soon as you plug something in the output, it opens up that ground connection because it's assumed that it's going to be terminated from that other cable wherever it's connected to on the output.
Okay, that makes sense.
So your termination moves from that to the other thing on the other end.
That also explains why one of the PVMs I used to own, whenever you used inputs and outputs, meaning like, console to the inputs, output to a different monitor, red would drop out. And that's probably because that termination, when you plugged it in, that auto sensing cable was probably not connected properly. It was probably just, I had to pop open the back and reconnect it or something.
It could be. Yeah, there's like a mechanical insertion opens up that thing. It's in the schematics. If you look at the schematics, you'll see that little...
Well, I feel properly learned. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yep.
Well, let's call it there for the night, since God knows if anybody actually... I mean, it seems like 90 people are still in the stream, or 80 people, but I don't know what percentage of those people can actually see anything.
Fair enough.
Thanks to you, Goob. Well, so if you're watching this later, sorry about that. If this thing gets saved off, don't know what the issue is, but yeah, we'll get back to the remaining questions next time. So yeah, let's sign off for tonight. You can find us at HD Retrovision, Bob's at RetroRGB. We got at Voultar Mod Shop and at DB_electronics.
Voultar Mod Shop also has an underscore.
Oh, right. Yep. Underscore.
Yeah.
And as always, if anybody has any problems or any issues at all I could take care of, just email sales@voultar.com.
Oh, fuck yourself so bad. Oh, I hope you die of AIDS.
If you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified when we do these things, or you can just follow us on the Twatters and we'll spam your accounts with unwanted messages.
Unwanted penises.
Alrighty. We'll see you guys next time.
See you guys. Had a good one.
Take care.
Later.